Well, if I was a crow, I would not want to be alive today. Because I know that the media would be eating me because that's what the media is doing. They are eating crow today. And the reason why they are eating crow is because of what they said over the summer about Howard Stern. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. Over the summer, the U.S. Sun, which, by the way, is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox State Regime Channel, or Fox Propaganda Channel, as my good friend Darren Gibson calls it. He also owns the New York Post and the Fox Network, and of course he used to own 20th Century Fox, but he sold that to Disney. Of course, they renamed it 20th Century Studios. So, anyway, what's going on was that, so they spread a lie about Howard Stern last summer that Howard was going to be fired from SiriusXM for being too woke. And Howard obviously was going to tell the truth last week, but here's what happened. Howard had a cold. Now, there were rumors going around from various sources that Howard's mother died. That's not true. She's still alive. That his dad died. He actually died 2 years ago. He had a cat that died. And, he was close to the cat. And it was true. A couple of his cats died this past summer, including Walter, who Howard said that he had even before he knew Beth. And it just goes on and on. And, so what's going on now is Howard is... So he was finally back on the air this morning. He told the truth about what happened. And what happened was that he had a cold last week. He had a cold, and he claimed he got it from going to a Maren Morris concert. And he was basically in his house the whole summer. He didn't go out and do stuff or nothing. And so he just chilled in his home in the Hamptons. Well, then what happened was Howard... So Howard went on the air this morning. He said that he is still in very good relations with SiriusXM, and they are planning to work a deal out. Wrong button. They're trying to work out a deal so Howard can stay with SiriusXM and stay with them for a long, long time. Another 5 years, maybe just another year. Now, the media has gotten a lot of information wrong. Number one, he's in a $500 million contract. I don't think that's true. Another situation was that Howard was fired for being woke. We covered that one. There's plenty, get this, there's a lot of righties and lefties who work for SiriusXM. They even have a left-leaning channel. So the question is, why did the media eat this up? Why did the media... It's like it was all started by Rupert Murdoch's people, but then all the media picked it up, including NBC. NBC talked about it on the nightly news last week. And they were like, well, and it's not, they didn't even, it's like, okay, did anybody go to Howard's people? And not only that, a lot of the bullshit that was spewing was from former employees of Stern's. And they were coming up with bullshit like, well, nobody listens to Howard anymore. His numbers are falling. Oh, I once worked for Stern and I only made $20,000 a year. Yeah, like Stuttering John. I got news for you. Let's remember that Vice did a documentary on Howard, and, they tried to trash him and poke fun of him for the fact that he's evolved. And I know he doesn't do strippers on the show anymore. He doesn't have porn stars or Yucko the Clown. And I agree. He's really trying to get more big name celebrities. And some people are like, yeah, I used to love Stern, but not anymore. And I'll even admit, when Howard has like Maroon 5 or Coldplay in the studio, I changed the goddamn channel. It's like, I'm not a soccer mom. And I know that's what happens when you are married to a very hot woman like Beth Ostrowski. Howard and Beth are two peas in a carrot. They're like two peas in a pod. The reality is, I know when, it was like the last time I was in a good relationship with a beautiful girl. I'll be honest with you. I tried to look at porn when I was with her. I was like, my heart belongs to this woman. It's a different story. You understand, and I understand it too. It's like, other women turned Howard off. Maybe if Beth were to leave Howard, or maybe if they break up, then yes, the porn stars will be back and the strippers would be back. And maybe that kind of tells me too that Howard and Allison, his ex-wife, weren't seeing eye to eye. That could be it. And Howard loved being with somebody 20 years younger than he was. Yeah, anyway. You see, folks, I agree. The media should have. Howard ended today's show by simply saying, you really should have come to me first before coming up with so much shit about me. And I know. That's what, folks, I want to tell you a couple of stories. You see, the reason why I started Chuck69.com was because I was pissed that the Northern Michigan media didn't care about me. It was, I'm going to tell you a sad story. My mom's best friend from Northern Michigan, true story, she went to Elk Rapids schools. And in her graduating class, so she went to her 50th, I think it was 50th anniversary graduation. I don't remember. And she recently had a high school graduation party. Only 17 people showed up. And I think part of the reason why too was because, some people simply died very young, because that's all there is to do in Northern Michigan. Get drunk and do drugs. Hell, remember something, folks. The guy who stabbed all these people at the Walmart in Traverse City not too long ago, he grew up in a small town, and Pellston, allegedly, and wasn't much to do in Pellston except do drugs and drink and all that good stuff. And when you're a teenager, it's a different story. I remembered, I told you the story. I worked at a restaurant that had a karaoke night, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because, you had to be 21. And they went 21 and over at 10 o'clock. And that was when my shift ended. And it's like, it really hurt me that, that they kind of looked down on me because of this. And yet, this same restaurant hired a child molester to work right next to me. And I'm like, okay, this is why I created this website. I mean, my parents were dragging me through their problems with their divorce. I wasn't doing well in school because I was bullied a lot. I didn't have many friends. People were ignoring me. I ended up having to, go, take a girl from another school district to be my prom date, and she was, she was butt ugly. I mean, I can go on and on. But the biggest complaint, one of the biggest complaints I truly had was that there was no radio station for me. I was a hard rock and heavy metal guy, and yet there were 5 radio stations all at once playing Where Have All the Cowboys Gone by Paula Cole. Oh, we don't want to play Korn. Oh, they're evil. Oh, we don't do Tool or Rage Against the Machine. Oh, we don't do that. Oh. And explain this to me. Does anybody still give a shit about Paula Cole? Jesus Christ. Is she even still out there touring and singing and recording? I don't know. But that's how corporate and shitty Northern Michigan radio was back in the 90s. And even the good news was in 98, we finally had a station called The Zone that signed on the air at 95.5 in Traverse City, which is now Rock 105 and 95.5. And what happened was, so I applauded that station. So first of all, the station sucked in the beginning for about 2 years, because 2.5 years or so. And the reason why was because it was another outlet for Paula Cole and the Goo Goo Dolls and Jewel and Sarah McLachlan and all these goddamned wuss artists. And it was like, why am I stuck up here? Oh yeah, it was because my parents were from Detroit and they thought their lives would be better living up there, and it sure as fuck wasn't. So let me tell you what happened. In 2000, there was a woman named Kimberly Fox who became the station's programming director. And she finally convinced the station's owner, a guy by the name of Palmer Pyle. Palmer Pyle was a former football player for the Minnesota Vikings. She went to Palmer and said, we're not getting good numbers. And then, I guess there was a little bit of a back and forth, and, the consultant kept telling them, oh, we need to be, family-friendly alternative because bands like Korn and Rage Against the Machine won't work up here. But guess who was saying all this shit? A consultant from Florida. And people in Florida don't give a shit about what we want in Northern Michigan. And guess what happened? When Kimberly Fox started adding more new metal to the playlist, the Zone kicked KLT's ass to the curb. So this is what happens. I was singing the praises of the Zone. Meanwhile, I was getting emails from this asshole who claimed to be Kimberly's ex-husband, and he wrote to me and said, give her the Bee-otch of the day because she's a fucking slut who sleeps around and does drugs, and she once weighed 300 pounds and lost all the weight because of her drug abuse. I wasn't going to give her anything because, look, I will never be a mark for KLT. KLT refused to listen to my generation, so fuck them. Fuck that station. Fuck their shitty-ass morning show, Omelette and Finster. You know, of course, Finster, crackhead. Finster's a crackhead, and he sounds like one. Omelette, basically took the Stern show and ripped it off. I mean, if Howard was in Traverse City, if his show was ever heard in Traverse City on terrestrial radio, mark my words, he would be giving Omelette and Finster, a piece of his mind. Because, they have their own whack pack and, the Misfits. God damn. And, of course, Terry Ray. I'll say, folks, she is the biggest cunt in Northern Michigan. Biggest cunt female broadcaster in the world. I never liked her. Period. End of story. Nothing more than, and, there's that part of me that, I'll just, anyway. But it was also that, many years ago too, KLT. So what happened was, of course, KLT had an afternoon guy named Tom Devitt. I've told you the story about Tom. And Tom screwed me over years ago. Because of what I was saying about him years ago on the Buzzboard. And Tom apparently teamed up with a bunch of people who I once looked up to, and they stabbed me in the back. And what happened, he was one of the guys who I'm assuming was one of the Dale Motels on the Buzzboard. So what Tom did was he was saying some very private shit about me, about where I worked, and I mean, I can go on and on, but Tom weaseled his way. He was the morning guy at the Zone about 27 years ago. And then he got fired, so he ended up in the thumb of Michigan at a really crappy station down there. And then he ended up back in northern Michigan, back at the Zone's then sister station, Big Country, and the Bear. He worked at both stations. And then he got fired again because he was a total dick. And he ends up at KLT doing the afternoon show. So while he's at KLT, he decides to go, he decides to rip Smitty off by, doing a lot of the same shit that he was doing. He even had a segment called The Sack, in which was a knockoff of Smitty's Box, which was where he got to play a song that wasn't played on the radio very often. So guess what happened? Smitty called him out, and then what happened was Tom fought back by, along with the couple that was trying to buy KLT at the time, the Coins, by playing. So this is what happened. Smitty had a private, I wouldn't say private, but he had his own SoundCloud account where he did bits he wouldn't play on the radio. And one of them involved him playing a song that involved the C word, the word cunt. And so this is what Tom did. Tom spliced the bit together, those two bits together, and sent it to Cheryl Coyne. And Cheryl sent it to all of the advertisers on Rock 105.955. So this is what happened. I called out KLT and the Coins. Shame on them for doing what they did, because Smitty got fired. So anyway, the long story short, to make a very long story short, Smitty told me all this because we were friends on Facebook. And he basically said, these guys are a lot of people won't work for them, and so on and so on. And what happened was A few months later, Jerry Coyne told me to please call him. And I did. And Jerry told me, well, what Smitty told you was pure bullshit. And the truth was, we wanted him to work at KLT. We had 2 job interviews with him. And Smitty told me the same. He refused to work at KLT and be the morning guy because he didn't want to be a sellout. He didn't want to go around kissing Terry Ray's fat ass. Because he hated KLT. And tell you the truth, I hate KLT because they didn't care about my generation. They told my generation to go fuck themselves. Oh, but we're number 1 in the ratings. Yeah, it's because you cover more real estate with your signals because of, what's that dude's name? The general manager guy. Ross Bierman's stepson. Yeah, that was what he did. He bought KLT, and then he decided to switch both the both the country music signals, simulcasters at 93.5 in Boyne City and 96.7 in Rogers City, into Chris Warren. There we go. Into KLT repeaters. And guess what? KLT's number 1 because of this. And that's the problem. It's because of Midwestern broadcasting that KLT went up in the ratings. Not because of the music or in Finster or whatever. The truth of the matter is, KLT is, I understand. The reason why they're number 1 too is because the baby boomers love it. And that's the big audience in Northern Michigan. All the goddamn baby boomers that love it up there. And they all get drunk and drugged up and... Anyway. So they basically gave me a bunch of excuses. That, my wife is a member of the Michigan Lottery Board. And she, we don't advertise on stations that attack other stations. And it's like... So this is what happened. I basically allowed him to talk into one ear and out my other ear. Because Smitty told me just a few hours beforehand that he got rehired at Rock 105 and 95.5 because they cleared things up with the advertisers. And Smitty told me they lost like $40,000 worth of advertising because of what the Coins and Tom Devitt did. And surprise, when the Coins withdrew their bid to buy KLT and the other Goki family stations, and of course, like I mentioned, half of the stations went to Jesus, and only 2 of them ended up still commercial stations. So what happened was the Coins, of course, they ended up controlling WLDR. They bought the transmitter from Roy Henderson, and of course it led to a big court battle because Henderson mismatched one of the transmitters and so on and so on. The point is, folks, I know you're supposed to get both sides of the story, but sometimes you need to know the truth. Who's really telling the truth here? And honestly, I think Smitty was telling me the truth, plain and simple. Because the Coins, they won their battle against Henderson, but they lost the leads to the stations. Then they tried again with the guy who tried to buy JML a couple of years ago, and so now they're not leasing anymore. They're stuck with their stations in Grayling and trying to make the best of it. But that's the way it is. Sometimes we do play favorites in terms of journalism, because you want the things you want, and you want to try to tell people your side of the story. And the media, let's remember something, folks. Corporate media turned their backs on Howard Stern years ago. Companies like Clear Channel and Cumulus and, CBS, corporate media didn't fight for Howard, so Sirius took a chance on him and won. And now they're trying to tell people, oh, nobody listens to Howard. Only has 100,000 listeners. No, everyone's turning their back on Stern because he turned their backs on Artie Lang and Jackie the Joke Man. And now they all like to talk to Opie from Opie and Anthony, and Opie is an ass clown. So anyway, the rest of this. So what I'm trying to say here is, I agree with Howard. Listen to him. Get his side of the story, and don't get your shit from corporate media. You need to know. You need to think of who's the lesser of all the evils here, and it's definitely Howard. I know some people are like, oh, he lives in a $600 million. Oh, he's worth $600 million. He deserves it. He deserves it because he built an audience. He said things that people wanted to listen to, because most morning shows in America before he got, it was all either boring ass shit or some wacky morning zoo bullshit that, was more annoying than funny. And I know he is slowing down. If Howard wants to pull David Letterman and just, do specials for the rest of his life, let it be. If he wants to, stay, if he wants to go keep on with SiriusXM and continue with what he's doing, let it be too. Hey, his dad made it to 99. He's 71. He probably still got, a good 20 years left on him for all I know. But all I can say is, I agree with Howard. Let him talk first before you come up with such bullshit. Oh, we heard it. Yeah, it's like, the media won't reveal the sources either. I think if Howard was smart, he'd call the lawyer. He'd call his lawyer and sue Fox for slander. Because they're just doing it for the money. It's all about what they want, folks. It's not about telling the truth. The news is not supposed to be about making a dime. It's about telling you the goddamn truth. And if Rupert Murdoch and his thugs want to blast propaganda about Howard Stern, then, you got to realize something. These people are liars. And they've been lying to our face for decades. That's how he got wealthy in the first place. By owning tabloids like The Sun. And as they all say, the truth will let you free. Rupert Murdoch is not a good newsman. He's a businessman, and money is more important than the truth. If he wants to keep blabbing about Howard this and Howard that, fine. I don't watch Fox News personally, and sometimes even traditional media like NBC, they gotta realize that they're making mistakes too. But what will happen will happen. I hope that whatever situation happens between Howard and Sirius, it'll be a good one. And the listeners will rejoice. And I'll continue to be listening. Because, hey, what else am I going to listen to in the morning? Well, I'm at work. It ain't going to be free beer and hot wings, folks. All right, folks. Good day and good luck. I'm King Chuck. Have a great day, everybody.